The twin suns of Zathra Prime hung low in the sky, their golden light spilling across the crystal towers of the capital city. The air shimmered with soft colors, refracting from the tall spires that reached into the clouds. Sky lanes were crowded, with sleek hovercrafts, their polished surfaces flashing silver as they moved through the air. The entire city looked like it was made for beauty, order, and perfection. But Lorana Vey felt none of it. She stood on the wide balcony of her family's estate, her gaze fixed on the city she had once loved. Today it felt like a cage of glass, beautiful but unbreakable. Below, the garden's white blossoms swayed in the warm breeze, their petals drifting toward the fountains. The flowers were perfect, untouched by wind or dust, just like the noble families of Zathra, at least on the surface. Inside, she could still hear her mother's voice echoing from moments earlier. 10 suitors, Lorana. 10. And all of them turned you down. Do you understand how humiliating this is? Lorana had tried to answer, but her mother's words had left no space for explanation. It was not her fault, she thought. She had tried to meet them halfway. She had attended the formal dances, the endless banquets, the polite talks about politics and trade. But every time, there came the same rejection. She is too strange. She speaks to commoners. She values emotion over strategy. In Zathran noble society, those were not just quirks, they were fatal flaws. Lyrana had never fit into the mold. While other nobles looked down on lesser species, she felt curious about them. While others spoke only of power, she wanted to speak of peace. That difference had now cost her more than she could have imagined. Her mother had finally said it. If this continues, no one will marry you, and our family's influence will vanish. It was not about love. It was never about love. It was about alliances, power, and reputation. That evening, the estate's great hall filled with guests for a diplomatic gathering. Dozens of alien dignitaries mingled beneath chandeliers of crystal light. The air smelled faintly of spice and flowers. Lorana wore the traditional gown of her house, shimmering silver with soft blue embroidery. She walked with perfect posture, smiling when required, but her heart was elsewhere. She noticed him then, a tall figure standing near the far wall. His uniform was dark navy with the small silver emblem of the Terran Diplomatic Corps on his shoulder. A human. Humans were still new to the interstellar stage, but their reputation was complicated. They were seen as adaptable, unpredictable, and surprisingly resilient for a species with no natural weapons or armor. Many nobles still considered them amusing, at best, primitive at worst. This one didn't look amused. He stood with his hands behind his back, watching the room with calm eyes. His short dark hair was neatly cut, his jawline sharp, but it was his expression that caught her attention. Steady, observant, without the constant calculation she saw in her own people. Commander Ethan Cross, she recalled from the guest list. The human envoy. As the evening continued, the usual whispers began. Lorana Vey, the cursed bride. She cannot keep a suitor. Even her own kind avoid her. She pretended not to hear. She moved from one group to another, speaking with the smooth politeness drilled into her since childhood. Yet the laughter behind her back kept growing. Then came the final blow. A young noblewoman from a rival house, Saraya Tal, approached with a cruel smile. Still alone, Lorana? Perhaps tonight you'll find someone willing to take pity on you. A few guests chuckled. The sting burned hot in Lorana's chest. Her hands tightened at her sides. She could have walked away. She should have walked away. But something in her snapped. Her gaze swept the hall, past the laughing faces, past the glittering gowns, until her eyes found Ethan. The human was still watching quietly, as if studying the room from a distance. He looked calm, solid, safe. Before she could think it through, she stepped forward. Her heels clicked against the polished floor. The room seemed to hush, sensing something unusual. She stopped in front of Ethan. "Commander," she said, her voice steady though her heart pounded. "Will you be my husband?" The silence was complete. Every alien in the hall froze. Glasses paused in midair. Conversations stopped mid-word. Ethan blinked. Slowly, he glanced around at the sea of shocked faces before looking back at her. Her eyes searched his, not pleading, but determined. Somewhere behind her, Soraya let out a soft, mocking laugh, clearly expecting the human to refuse. Ethan didn't answer right away. He studied her, his gaze holding hers as if weighing the truth of her request. And Lyrana, for the first time in weeks, felt her chest loosen. She had no idea if he would say yes. But at least, in this one moment, she had chosen for herself. Not for her family, not for the nobles, but for her own heart. The hall stayed silent. Dozens of alien eyes stared at Lyrana and Ethan. Even the musicians had stopped playing. The warm light from the crystal chandeliers seemed frozen in place, like the entire world was holding its breath. Commander Ethan Cross didn't move. His calm brown eyes studied Lyrana, as if trying to see past her fine gown and noble posture into the reason behind her sudden question. "Will you be my husband?" she repeated, her voice steady but her heartbeat racing. No one had ever dared such a thing in Zathran noble society, to propose without family approval, without months of political negotiations, and to a human of all people. It was unheard of. From the corner of the room, Soraya Tal's mocking smirk widened. "Careful, human. She's desperate." A few nobles laughed under their breath. Ethan's gaze swept across the hall, catching the cold stares and the barely hidden amusement. His jaw tightened slightly, but his voice was even. "That is an unexpected question, Lady Vey." "You don't have to answer here," Lyrana said quickly, though she kept her chin high. "I simply needed to ask." Whispers filled the air now, low and sharp. A dozen alien translators whispered into the ears of their diplomats. The news was already spreading. Ethan gave a slow nod. "Perhaps we should speak somewhere private." Lyrana's mother, Lady Vey, appeared at her daughter's side instantly. Her expression was tight and furious, but she did not cause a scene, not in front of so many witnesses. "Commander," she said with perfect noble politeness. "This way." Moments later, they were in one of the estate's side chambers. A smaller room with tall windows and the soft scent of flowers drifting from the gardens. Ethan stood by the window, hands still behind his back, as Lyrana closed the door. The noise from the great hall was distant now, like a storm outside. "All right," Ethan said. "Why?" Lyrana hesitated. She had acted on impulse, but that didn't mean her reasons weren't real. She took a slow breath. "My world is not kind to those who think differently," she said. "My people value strength, strategy, and control. I value more than that. 10 suitors have rejected me, not because I lack beauty or wealth, but because I do not treat others as tools, because I speak to those below my rank. That is shameful to them." Ethan's expression didn't change, but he leaned forward slightly, listening. "My rivals mock me," Lyrana continued, "and my family fears we will lose all influence if I do not marry soon. But I will not marry someone who sees me as a pawn." "And you think a human wouldn't?" Ethan asked. Her eyes met his. "Humans have no stake in Zathran politics. You're not bound by our games, and you seem honest." For a moment, the only sound was the faint hum of the city outside. Ethan turned to face the window, thinking. His career as a diplomat had taught him many things, that alliances could be deadly, that promises were often traps, and that trust was the rarest currency in the galaxy. "You understand," he said at last, "that a union between a human envoy and a Zathran noble would not just be a personal matter. It would be political. It could change how our species deal with each other. It would cause waves." "I know," Lorana said softly, "but I am already drowning in those waves, Commander. At least this way, I choose who stands beside me." Ethan turned back to her. His eyes were steady, weighing her words. "If I do this, it will not be for politics. It will be real. I will not stand beside you as a prop." Something in his tone made her chest tighten. This was not a man who spoke without meaning his words. "I understand," she said. They left the side chamber together. The great hall was still buzzing with whispers. The moment they reappeared, dozens of eyes locked onto them, some with curiosity, others with scorn. Ethan didn't speak to the crowd. He simply offered Lorana his arm. She hesitated only a second before taking it. Together, they walked across the hall, ignoring the whispers, the stares, and the small bursts of laughter from certain corners. Soraya Tal intercepted them near the main doors, her smile sharp as a blade. "So the human didn't say no?" she said sweetly. Ethan glanced at her just once. "The human doesn't answer to you." The color in Soraya's face darkened slightly. Lorana hid her satisfaction behind a polite smile. By the next morning, the news had reached every corner of Zathra Prime and beyond. Holoscreens in the city flashed with images of Lorana standing beside the human commander. The words, "unprecedented proposal," blazed across news feeds. Some citizens were intrigued. Others were outraged. The Noble Council called an emergency meeting to discuss the potential diplomatic consequences. Lorana stayed inside the Vey estate that day, knowing the streets would be swarming with reporters and gossipers. She sat in the library, sunlight falling across the tall shelves when Ethan entered. "They're calling it a scandal," he said without preamble. "They were calling me a failure before," Lorana replied. "Scandal is an improvement." Ethan almost smiled at that. "You really don't fear their opinion, do you?" "I fear it," she admitted, "but I will not live by it." He nodded slowly, as if confirming something to himself. "Then perhaps this will work." Her heart gave a small, hopeful beat. "You mean—" "I mean," he said, "I will stand beside you, not for politics, for you." Lorana's breath caught. She had expected resistance, bargaining, perhaps even pity, but not this. Ethan's voice was calm, but there was a quiet steel in it. "Understand this, Lady Vey. If I say yes, I keep my promises. I won't play the games your nobles play, and I won't let you stand alone." For the first time in months, Lorana felt a genuine smile rise on her lips. "Then, Commander Cross," she said softly, "you have my trust." By the time night fell, the scandal had grown into a storm. But in the heart of that storm, Lorana felt something strange. It wasn't fear. It was the first spark of hope. The news had already traveled far beyond Zathra Prime. Across multiple star systems, holoscreens showed the same image. Lorana Vey standing beside Commander Ethan Cross, her hand resting lightly on his arm. The headline was always some version of the same phrase. "Zathran Noble proposes to human envoy. Engagement confirmed." Some networks treated it like a romantic miracle. Others called it a dangerous mistake. In the streets of the Zathran capital, it became the only topic of conversation. Inside the Vey estate, Lorana was seated in her private sitting room, preparing for yet another public appearance. The family's political advisor, a stern older Zathran named Morel, stood beside her, reading from a glowing datapad. "You will attend the diplomatic banquet this evening," he said, his voice dry and precise. "You will wear something traditional, smile only at the right moments, and avoid giving the impression that your human fiancé is influencing you." Lorana almost laughed. I asked him to marry me, Morel. Of course he influences me. Morel's face tightened, but he didn't argue. The council is already divided. Some believe this union could strengthen ties with the Terran Alliance. Others see it as weakness. You must be careful. Ethan entered the room just then, dressed in his formal Terran uniform, dark navy with silver trim. He had polished his boots and straightened his collar, but there was still something casual in the way he carried himself. You look ready for battle, Lorana said lightly. Isn't that what this is? He replied. Morel cleared his throat. Commander Cross, you will need to follow certain etiquette tonight. Zathran tradition requires— I've been reading the guide you sent, Ethan interrupted politely, but I'm not promising to bow 3 times before every handshake. Lorana bit back a smile. She could already imagine the nobles' faces. That evening, the banquet hall glittered with crystal light. Long tables overflowed with delicacies from across the galaxy, steaming plates of spiced roots, tall glasses of shimmering nectar, and silver bowls filled with rare fruits. The moment Ethan and Lorana entered, conversation slowed. Every noble present turned to watch them. Lorana felt the weight of those stares like a physical thing. Ethan, on the other hand, seemed unaffected. He greeted each person they passed with a calm nod, even when their expressions were openly hostile. At their assigned table, Lorana noticed the seating arrangement. They had been placed near the far end, away from the council members and high-ranking guests. A subtle insult. She waited for Ethan to react, but he simply pulled out her chair, waited for her to sit, then took his own seat. You're not bothered? She asked quietly. I've been on enough diplomatic missions to know that the seat they give you doesn't matter, he said. It's how you use it. The dinner began, and soon the questions started. So, one noble asked with a thin smile, what is human courtship like? Do you also exchange livestock? Ethan didn't miss a beat. Not usually, he said, but we do sometimes give flowers. Another noble leaned forward. And your lifespan. It's so short. How can you promise anything lasting? Ethan took a sip of his drink before answering. The value of a promise isn't in how long you can keep it. It's in whether you mean it when you make it. Lorana noticed several guests glance at one another, as if unsure whether to be impressed or dismissive. Later, when music filled the hall, Ethan stood and offered Lorana his hand. She hesitated. Zathran dances were complex, filled with small, symbolic movements. You know this dance? She asked quietly. Not a step, he said with a small grin. But I'm a quick learner. They moved to the floor. At first it was awkward. His human stride didn't match the smooth glide of Zathran's steps. A few guests snickered, but then Ethan laughed softly, and Lorana found herself laughing too. Their movements became less about perfection and more about rhythm until other couples began joining them on the floor. By the time the song ended, some of the earlier tension had eased. A few nobles even offered polite nods. In the days that followed, Ethan and Lorana attended several more public events. Each time, the pattern repeated. Subtle insults, careful tests, and small traps meant to make them stumble. But Ethan had a way of turning them aside without anger. When someone mocked human technology as primitive, he simply explained how Terran ships could be repaired with basic tools when most Zathran vessels required specialized factories. When someone implied humans were fragile, he told a brief story of surviving a crash landing on an uninhabited moon with only a knife and a solar blanket. The common citizens began to notice. In market squares, shopkeepers whispered that the human envoy spoke plainly and treated everyone with respect, even the servants. In the spaceport, dock workers told stories of how he had carried his own equipment instead of having others do it for him. Not everyone was pleased. One evening, as Lyrana prepared for another council reception, her mother entered the room looking concerned. "There are whispers," Lady Vey said. "Some say the human is making you too popular among the lower classes, that your alliance will change more than politics. It will change the order of things." Lyrana straightened her shoulders. "Perhaps it should." Her mother sighed. "You do not understand the danger. Change creates enemies." "I already have enemies," Lyrana said simply. That night's reception was quieter than usual. The atmosphere felt tense, as if a storm was brewing. Lyrana noticed several nobles watching them with sharper eyes than before. Halfway through the evening, a young noble from House Tal, clearly related to Soraya, approached. He held a glass of bright green wine and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Tell me, Commander," he said loudly enough for nearby guests to hear, "is it true that humans choose their partners based on feelings?" "Yes," Ethan said calmly. The noble chuckled. "How quaint. Zathrans choose based on strength, status, and advantage. Feelings fade. Power remains." Ethan met his gaze steadily. "Then I hope you never find yourself in a moment where power can't help you. Because in that moment, you'll wish for someone who stays because they care, not because they gain." The noble's smile faltered. Several guests looked away, suddenly interested in their drinks. Lyrana felt a quiet pride bloom in her chest. Ethan wasn't just surviving here, he was changing the conversation. As they left the hall together, Lyrana glanced at him. "You know they'll come at us harder now." "I know," he said. "Good thing I'm not afraid of hard fights." And for the first time, she began to believe that maybe, just maybe, this union could survive. The sun had barely risen over Zathra Prime, and yet the city already hummed with activity. Hovercrafts zipped between crystal towers, merchants shouted their wares, and the council chambers prepared for another tense session. Inside the Vey estate, Lyrana was already awake, staring at the window. Her mind churned with the events of the past weeks, the public engagement, the whispers, the mixed reactions of her people. She had hoped that being with Ethan would ease the pressure, but it seemed to have only increased it. A soft knock at her door drew her attention. Morel, her political advisor, entered carrying a small datapad. His expression was grave. "Lady Vey," he began, "I believe you should see this." On the datapad, a series of encrypted reports scrolled quickly. They detailed a pattern. The rejections of Lyrana's previous suitors were not accidents, not the judgments of her peers, but carefully orchestrated moves by House Tal to weaken the Vey family's influence. "They plotted against you," Morel said quietly. "Each refusal was planned. Every humiliation was timed. They wanted to force a weaker alliance, perhaps even a marriage they could control." Lyrana's chest tightened. She had sensed hostility before, but to see proof, it made the betrayal sting sharper than any insult. "Why?" she asked, almost to herself. "Power," Morel said. "Control. Your family stands in their way. They want the Vey influence diminished, and now they may see your engagement to a human as another threat." Later that day, Ethan arrived at the estate. Lyrana was sitting at the library table, eyes fixed on the datapad. He approached quietly, reading over her shoulder. "This is serious," he said, his voice low. "House Tal isn't just playing games. They're trying to destroy your family." "I know," Lyrana replied. "And now with the council watching us, I don't even know where to start. If they succeed, everything my family has built, everything I believed in, it will crumble." Ethan placed a hand gently on hers. "Then we start by staying one step ahead. Together." She looked at him. Really looked at him. The human's calm presence was like a shield against the storm of her life. He had no noble blood, no power in Zathran politics. And yet, Here he was, ready to stand beside her in a world designed to tear her down. Their first step was subtle investigation. Using his diplomatic access and human intuition, Ethan began tracking suspicious communications, tracing hidden transactions between House Tal and some of the less scrupulous council members. "See this?" he asked, pointing to a set of messages. "These meetings, they're planning more than slander. There's an attempt to sabotage your family's standing in the council, and if it fails, someone could get hurt." Lyrana swallowed hard. "Someone like you?" He smiled faintly. "Someone like both of us, if we're not careful." Days later, during a council hearing, tensions reached a new level. House Tal's representatives spoke with honeyed words, twisting facts and presenting false narratives about Lyrana's engagement. "She risks undermining centuries of tradition," one council member said. "A human is untested. A human cannot be trusted with Zathran alliances." Lyrana felt her stomach tighten, but Ethan leaned close, whispering, "Remember, truth is stronger than fear. We will show them." When it was her turn to speak, she rose with poise. "I am aware of your concerns," she said clearly, "but this engagement is my choice. Not forced, not accidental. I choose Commander Cross because of his character, his integrity, and his courage. Qualities that matter far more than bloodlines." "Or politics," the room murmured, some in approval, many in shock. But Lyrana noticed small nods from citizens watching outside the council chambers via holo transmission. Ordinary people were beginning to see her not just as a noblewoman, but as someone who could challenge injustice. That night, a message arrived for Ethan. Someone had followed his investigation and discovered his presence in a restricted part of the city. "An attempt is being planned," Ethan said immediately, showing the report to Lyrana. "Someone wants to scare us. Maybe worse." Lyrana's heart raced. "What do we do?" Ethan's expression was steady. "We prepare, and we don't hide." True to his word, the next evening, while they were returning from a public engagement, a sudden explosion rocked the plaza. Alarms blared and smoke rose in thick gray clouds. Citizens screamed and fled. Ethan grabbed Lyrana's arm, pulling her behind a protective pillar. The air smelled of scorched metal and dust. As the chaos unfolded, he noticed a figure disappearing into the crowd, someone armed, intent on attack. "Go!" he shouted. "Follow me!" They ran together through twisting alleys and side streets. Ethan's training and experience gave him a calm clarity that Lyrana could not match. Every obstacle was noted, every danger anticipated. By the time the city guard arrived, the would-be assailant had vanished. No one was hurt, save for minor injuries from flying debris. In the quiet aftermath, Lyrana sat on the steps of the estate, her hands trembling slightly. Ethan knelt beside her. "They tried to scare us," he said softly, "but it didn't work." "I was afraid," she admitted. "Afraid for myself, for you, for my family." Ethan reached for her hand again. "Fear doesn't make you weak. It shows you care. And you care too much to let anyone hurt your people. That is strength, Lyrana. That is what makes you remarkable." Her chest warmed at his words. For the first time, she felt that someone truly understood her, not just her titles or responsibilities, but her heart. "And we face this together," Ethan continued. "No one else can decide for us. If they challenge us, we challenge them. If they plot against us, we plot smarter." She nodded slowly. "Then let them come. Let them see that the Vey family is not alone, and neither am I." The next morning, holo screens across Zathra Prime carried the story of the attempted attack. Citizens were shocked, but the reports focused on the bravery of the human envoy and the noblewoman who refused to hide. Public sentiment began to shift slightly. For Lyrana, the incident was more than a political turning point. It was a realization. She did not have to fit the mold of her people. With Ethan by her side, she could redefine what it meant to be noble, brave, and humanely strong in the galaxy. As she looked at him, standing tall despite the danger, she thought of her first impulsive question in the banquet hall. "Will you be my husband?" Now she understood that question was not just about companionship. It was about partnership, trust, and courage, the qualities that might just save her family, her people, and perhaps even change the hearts of an entire world. And for the first time in her life, Lorana felt truly ready to face the shadows behind the throne. The great hall of the Zathran Council was silent, heavy with anticipation. Crystal chandeliers glittered above, casting soft light across rows of seats where nobles and council members sat in rigid formality. Outside, citizens had gathered, watching, via hollow screens, their whispers echoing through the city. For Lorana, the weight of the moment pressed against her chest. Weeks of schemes, whispers, and attacks had brought her here. She adjusted her silver-blue gown, feeling Ethan's steady presence beside her. The human envoy stood tall, calm, his dark eyes scanning the council members as if daring them to challenge him. "You called this meeting," Lorana began, her voice clear and commanding, "to discuss the recent disturbances involving my engagement. I am here to speak not as a pawn, not as a child of noble blood, but as an individual who chooses her own path." Murmurs filled the room. Some council members shifted uneasily in their seats. A representative from House Tal rose, his expression cold. "Lady Vey, you claim choice, yet your engagement to a human disrupts our tradition, our alliances. Do you not see the danger in ignoring centuries of law and expectation?" Ethan stepped forward slightly, his voice calm but firm. "The danger is not in choice. The danger is in deception, manipulation, and the exploitation of those who cannot defend themselves. Evidence shows that House Tal orchestrated attempts to harm Lady Vey's family and manipulate her decisions. That is the true danger." The room fell silent. A few nobles whispered to each other, glancing at the data pads before them. Morel, Lyrana's advisor, gave her a subtle nod. Ethan had done his homework. Lyrana took a deep breath, her nerves steadying. Commander Cross speaks the truth. For months, House Tal engineered rejections, humiliation, and fear. They hoped I would fail, that my family would crumble. But I will not be controlled. I will not be silent. Several nobles exchanged sharp glances. Some were angry, some shocked. But the public watching outside leaned forward, captivated by the words of a young noblewoman refusing to bow to injustice. The representative from House Tal attempted to interrupt. "This is slander. You have no proof that—" Ethan raised a hand calmly. "The proof is here," he said, tapping his datapad. "Encrypted communications, financial transactions, meeting logs, all pointing to coordinated attacks on Lady Vey's family, attempts to influence her engagement, and evidence of an assault aimed at Commander Cross and Lady Vey themselves." He projected the files into the council's hollow screen. Rows of documents, messages, and images appeared for all to see. The council members leaned forward, reading. A few gasps were audible. "This is undeniable," one council elder muttered. Lorana felt a surge of confidence. "I have chosen my own partner," she said, turning to the council members. "Not for politics, not for power, but because he is honest, brave, and loyal. The man who stands beside me has proven his character, not just to me, but to every citizen who watches today." She paused. "I will not allow manipulation, deceit, or fear to dictate my life, nor will I allow my people to suffer because of petty rivalries. If House Tal wishes to challenge this engagement, they will answer not to rumor, but to truth." Murmurs turned into tense silence. A few nobles glanced at each other nervously. Even some of her own peers seemed unsure how to respond. Ethan stepped closer to Lorana. "Truth is simple," he said. "It is clear. It is strong. Lies and fear are temporary. But honesty withstands the test of time." The head of the council, an older Zathran with a long silver crest running along his skull, rose. "Lady Vey, Commander Cross," he said, his voice carrying authority. "Your evidence is compelling. The council will review these claims carefully, and House Tal will be held accountable if found guilty of deception or endangerment." A representative from House Tal scowled but said nothing. The council murmured among themselves, debating the consequences. Lorana exhaled slowly. It was not a complete victory, far from it, but the tide was turning. In the following weeks, Ethan and Lorana attended public events, interviews, and council sessions together. Each time, Ethan's calm reasoning and practical demonstrations of courage impressed both the citizens and moderate nobles. Stories of his intelligence, integrity, and bravery spread quickly. Citizens began to speak openly about their admiration for the human envoy and the noblewoman who refused to be silenced. Meanwhile, House Tal's attempts at smear campaigns began to fail. The citizens' growing respect for Ethan and Lorana made lies and rumors ineffective. People were beginning to question the old system, the unquestioned power of noble houses, and it frightened those who had relied on control and fear for centuries. One evening, Lorana and Ethan stood in the gardens of the Vey estate overlooking the city. The twin suns of Zathra Prime were setting, casting warm gold and crimson light across the skyline. "You've changed the public's perception of humans," Lorana said softly. "I never expected this." Ethan shrugged. "I didn't do it for them. I did it for you. But I guess when people see honesty, courage, and respect, they respond naturally." Lorana smiled. "It's strange. I was rejected by my own people, humiliated and isolated. And yet, standing here with you, I feel more accepted than ever." Ethan took her hand. "Because you chose someone who stands beside you, not someone who follows the rules blindly." The sound of distant laughter from the city drifted up to them. It was the laughter of ordinary citizens, watching the news, discussing the unfolding events. For the first time, Lorana realized something profound. Humans had not just survived in this alien world, they could teach it something too. Courage, honesty, and simple integrity. Values that even the noblest of Zathrans had sometimes forgotten. The next council session became a turning point. Under mounting public pressure, and with Ethan's evidence presented clearly, House Tal was forced to concede some of its power. Members were publicly reprimanded and their plots were exposed. Lorana and Ethan stood together during the announcements. Their hands brushed, and for a brief moment, neither needed words. They had faced the scheming nobles, the threats, and the fear, together. By the end of the session, the citizens' murmurs turned into applause. It was not loud, not triumphant, but it was acknowledgement. Respect for courage, loyalty, and honesty had begun to outweigh the old fears of power and bloodline. That evening, as they returned to the Vey estate, Lorana looked at Ethan. "We still have challenges ahead," she said. "I know," he replied, "but we face them together. That's what matters." Lorana nodded, feeling a steady warmth in her chest. For the first time, she believed that her choice, a human beside her, could not only survive in Zathran society, but change it. Together, they had faced deceit, manipulation, and danger. Together, they had stood as one. And for Lorana, that was more powerful than any noble title, any wealth, or any tradition. The streets of Zathra Prime were alive with color and motion. Banners had been raised in celebration, proclaiming the engagement of Lorana Vey and Commander Ethan Cross. Citizens crowded the plazas, watching hollow screens that broadcast every public ceremony and council announcement. The city had changed in just a few short weeks, not its towers or streets, but its spirit. Inside the Vey estate, Lyrana stood at a balcony overlooking the plaza. The twin suns shone brightly, reflecting gold from the crystal towers. She felt the warmth on her face, but it was not just sunlight she felt. It was hope, excitement, and a quiet pride. Ethan stepped beside her, dressed in formal Terran attire that was simple yet elegant. His eyes scanned the bustling city below. "People are happy," he said quietly. "They're starting to see that courage and honesty matter more than tradition alone." "They are," Lyrana said. "And it feels different. People smile freely now, not out of fear, but because they believe change is possible." He reached for her hand, holding it gently. "And it all started with a simple question." Lyrana smiled. "Will you be my husband?" I never thought those words would have this effect. Ethan's grin was faint, but confident. Sometimes the simplest acts of courage ripple farther than the loudest proclamations. The council had convened one final session. Representatives of House Tal sat stiffly, their influence diminished. Many nobles had shifted in support. Recognizing that the citizens admired Lyrana and Ethan's integrity and bravery, the head of the council rose. "Lady Vey, Commander Cross, your engagement has not only survived the schemes and plots against it, but it has inspired our people. Your courage in facing danger and standing for truth has changed hearts." Lyrana felt a warmth in her chest. She had spent so long fighting expectations and humiliation, and now recognition came not just from authority, but from the people themselves. Ethan stepped forward, his voice calm but resonant. "We are honored to stand here. This union is not about politics or power. It is about partnership, trust, and the belief that individuals can make a difference. Let it be known that courage and honesty are the true strengths of any society." The council members nodded, some reluctantly, some with genuine admiration. Citizens watching from afar applauded, their hollow avatars flickering in celebration. After the session, Lyrana and Ethan walked through the plaza together. Children waved, citizens called out their congratulations, and merchants offered small gifts. Flowers, trinkets, even sweet treats from distant planets. "This is overwhelming," Lyrana admitted, laughing softly. "I never imagined the city would embrace us so fully." Ethan looked around, his expression calm and thoughtful. "They've seen that we face danger together, that we act honestly, and that we care. Humans may be new to this galaxy, but courage is universal." Lyrana's heart swelled. For the first time, she truly understood that humans had something unique to offer. Not just technology or strength, but resilience, loyalty, and an unwavering sense of integrity. That evening, the Vey estate hosted a formal celebration. Nobles and citizens alike attended, mingling freely in a way that had been impossible before. The music was lively, the lights dazzling, and the atmosphere electric. As Lyrana and Ethan entered the hall, many paused to bow or nod respectfully. Some of the nobles who had opposed them now offered quiet acknowledgement. The tide had turned, not by force, but by steadfastness and honesty. On the balcony overlooking the celebration, Lyrana whispered, "Do you think we've really changed things?" Ethan took her hand and held it firmly. "We've started something. Change always begins with a single step, and we've taken many, together." She looked out over the crowd, feeling a profound sense of fulfillment. This was more than a personal victory. It was a statement. Courage, integrity, and partnership could challenge centuries of tradition and fear. As the night grew deeper, fireworks lit the sky. Golden trails of light arced above the city, reflecting in the crystal towers, casting long, glittering shadows across the streets. Citizens cheered, laughed, and celebrated, feeling for the first time that they were part of something larger than themselves, a world that could be fairer, stronger, and more humane. Lyrana leaned into Ethan, resting her head on his shoulder. "I never thought one question could change so much. Sometimes the boldest questions create the brightest dawns," he replied softly. They watched the fireworks together, the glow reflecting in their eyes. Around them, Zathra Prime was alive with hope. For every citizen who had felt powerless or voiceless, their courage had become a symbol. And for the galaxy watching, a human and a Zathran noble had proven that partnership, integrity, and trust could overcome fear, manipulation, and prejudice. In the days that followed, reforms began quietly. Policies that had once favored only the nobility were reviewed. Citizens gained more voice in local councils. Education initiatives were launched to encourage young Zathrans and humans to learn from each other. And everywhere, stories were told of the human envoy who refused to bow to fear, and the noblewoman who refused to be silenced. Through it all, Lyrana and Ethan remained at the center, not as rulers, but as examples. They spoke at public gatherings, visited schools, and joined citizens in daily life. Their bond, tested by plots, danger, and tradition, had grown stronger. Together, they embodied a simple truth. Bravery and honesty are stronger than fear and deception. On a quiet morning, weeks after the final council session, Lyrana and Ethan walked through the gardens of the Vey estate. Flowers swayed gently in the breeze. Sunlight sparkled on the fountains, and birds sang in the crystal trees. "Do you remember when I first asked you?" Lyrana said, smiling. Ethan laughed softly. "How could I forget? I thought you were brave and a little reckless." "You were right," she said, squeezing his hand. "And now the galaxy is seeing what humans can do, not just survive, but inspire." Ethan looked out over the city, then back at her. "We've done more than survive. We've proven that courage, trust, and loyalty can change the world. That's the human way, and now it's ours together." Lyrana nodded, feeling the weight of every struggle and triumph behind her. For once, she felt completely at peace. She had been rejected, humiliated, and doubted. Yet she had found her partner, her strength, and her purpose. As the twin suns rose again over Zathra Prime, casting gold across the city, Lyrana and Ethan stood side by side, ready to face whatever the future might bring. Together. For the first time, the people of Zathra Prime did not just see a noblewoman and a human envoy. They saw hope. They saw courage. They saw a brighter, fairer galaxy, one that humans and aliens could build side by side. And in that moment, the story of rejection, bravery, and trust came full circle. A simple question, "Will you be my husband?" had sparked a revolution of hearts, minds, and the very spirit of the stars.